They walked away thinking they'd won, but they'd lost the most important thing: control over their own thinking. In the next few minutes, I'll show you how to avoid this deadly mistake and keep your power in every situation. Because sometimes the loudest answer is deliberate silence. For the moment you lose your thinking is the moment you lose all your power. If you want your words to carry weight, don't just speak better, think clearer. Because when your thoughts are in order, your voice becomes untouchable. Chapter 1. Structured thinking. Organize your thoughts before you speak. You want you to imagine this. You're sitting in a conversation. Your mind is racing. You have something to say, something important, but when you finally open your mouth, the words don't match what's in your head. You freeze. Then you retreat. Later, you replay the scene and whisper to yourself, "Why didn't I just say it this way?" Sound familiar? I've been there. And I can tell you, you're not alone. Most people think their problem is speaking, but more often, the real issue is something deeper: thinking. We live in a world that rewards fast talkers, not deep thinkers. But clarity doesn't come from speed, it comes from structure. And structure begins long before the words ever leave your lips. Let me tell you a story. There was a man named David. In meetings, he was always the last to speak, not because he didn't have ideas, but because he was afraid he'd say something wrong. Others would dominate the room with fast, flashy words. David stayed quiet, listening, until one day his boss pulled him aside and said, "When you do speak, people lean in. Your words have weight." "Why is that?" David smiled. "Because I only speak when my thoughts are clear." David wasn't the smartest guy in the room, but he was the most structured. Before he opened his mouth, he would ask himself 3 questions. What am I really trying to say? Why does it matter? Can I say it simply? That habit changed everything. You see, our minds are like rooms. Some people live in mental clutter, thoughts piled everywhere, ideas unfinished, and then they wonder why, when it's time to speak, they can't find the words. But others take time to tidy up. They don't rush. They sort through their ideas, clean the mess, and put meaning where it belongs. That's structured thinking, and that's the kind of mind people trust. Stoicism teaches that clarity of speech is born from clarity of thought. Epictetus said, "First say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do." That applies to speech too. Before you speak to others, speak to yourself. Quietly, clearly. I want you to try something today. Before your next conversation, before that Zoom call, that family dinner, or that hard conversation, pause. Have you ever paused, just for 30 seconds, to get clear with yourself? Ask yourself, what is the heart of what I want to say? Can I say it without ego, without fluff, without fear? Because when your mind is in order, your words follow. You no longer speak to fill space, you speak to reveal something meaningful. A psychology study from Stanford once found that people who paused to organize their thoughts before speaking were not only perceived as more confident, they were actually remembered longer. Why? Because clarity sticks. In a world full of noise, structured thought is a form of respect for yourself and for your listener. Think about it like this. If your ideas were a meal, structured thinking is the recipe. Without it, your message becomes a mix of raw ingredients, hard to digest. But when you take time to prepare, to arrange the flavors, to guide your listener bite by bite, suddenly they don't just hear you, they trust you. And trust is what makes your words matter. I've worked with executives, teachers, artists, people from every walk of life. And the one trait that consistently sets the best communicators apart isn't vocabulary, charm, or charisma. It's structure. They don't just talk, they lead you through a thought journey. Calm, intentional, thoughtful. So, if you've ever said to yourself, "I'm just not good with words," I challenge that. You don't need to speak faster, or louder, or smarter. You need to think more clearly. Because when your thoughts have structure, your voice carries strength. And in that strength is the kind of calm the world needs more of. But here's something powerful. Sometimes the most meaningful thing you can say is nothing at all. In Chapter 2, we'll explore the weight of well-timed silence and how saying less can speak volumes. Chapter 2, the weight of well-timed silence. Let me ask you this. Have you ever been in a room where someone spoke and everyone went quiet? Or when someone said nothing but their silence changed everything? I want you to think about that dot. We often think that communication is all about speaking, about having the right words, the strongest arguments, the most clever comeback. But sometimes not speaking says the most, and sometimes the loudest voice in the room is the one that chooses silence. I want to share something with you that took me years to learn. Silence isn't weakness. It's restraint. It's wisdom in its purest form. There's a moment, a narrow, fleeting space between reaction and response, between impulse and intention. And in that space, if we learn to pause, just breathe, and hold our tongue, something powerful happens. We reclaim our power. Let me tell you about Anna. She was a department head at a high-pressure corporate firm. Brilliant, well-respected, but always under fire. At meetings, she'd often be provoked, criticized, challenged. In subtle ways, she used to fight back fast, firm, sharp, until one day, she didn't. She just paused, made eye contact, said nothing, and you know what happened? The room shifted. Her silence spoke louder than any words. It said, "I hear you, but I won't be dragged down to your level." And in that silence, people saw something deeper, her strength, her composure, her clarity. Stoic philosophy teaches us, you don't need to respond to everything. Not every arrow deserves your energy. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury." And sometimes, the most powerful way to be unlike him is to simply say nothing. But let's be clear, this isn't about avoidance. This isn't passivity. It's about being intentional. Silence, when well-timed, is not an escape from conflict. It's a signal. It signals self-control. It tells the world, I am not available for chaos. It tells your nervous system, you're safe, you don't need to react. And most of all, it tells you that you are the one in charge of your inner life. There's science behind this too. Neurological studies show that people who practice mindful silence before responding activate the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for logic, decision-making, and empathy. The reactive brain, the one that snaps, defends, or retaliates, goes quiet. Literally. So yes, silence can reshape not just the moment but the brain itself. But let's be real, silence isn't easy. When someone attacks us, we want to fight back. When we feel misunderstood, we want to explain. When the room gets tense, we want to fill it with something, anything. Have you ever noticed, the wisest people in your life are often the ones who speak less? They don't rush to fill the silence. They don't chase validation. They wait. And when they do speak, every word lands. There's a kind of energy in well-timed silence. It's not empty space, it's sacred space. A pause that allows thought to catch up with emotion. A moment where you say to yourself, I don't have to be reactive. I get to choose. The Stoics didn't just train themselves to speak with reason. They trained themselves to wait until reason returned before speaking at all. And sometimes, waiting is the most courageous thing you can do. So I want to invite you, next time someone pushes your buttons, next time you feel the pull to react, just try this. Pause. Stay still. Let the silence stretch. Don't rush to prove yourself. Don't rush to correct the record. Don't rush to fill the space. Let your stillness speak. Let your silence remind others that you're not here to win arguments. You're here to live with intention. Because in a noisy world full of opinions, reactions, and endless noise, well-timed silence is a rare form of power. It's not what we say that defines us. It's when we choose to say it, and when we don't. But what happens when you do need to speak? What if you feel something deeply, but can't find the right words? What if your inner clarity doesn't match your outer expression? That's where we're headed next. Because in Chapter 3, we'll explore how words, when chosen wisely, can do more than communicate. They can transform the way you think, feel, and connect. So stay with me. The silence was power. Now, let's give your voice the same strength. Chapter 3, Words as Tools. Expand your vocabulary. Expand your Mindy. Want you to imagine this. You're in the middle of a meaningful conversation. Your heart knows exactly what you feel. Your mind is clear. But when it's time to speak, the right words don't come. You try, you search, you fumble, and all you're left with is frustration. Have you ever felt that? I have. And what I've come to learn is this. Our ability to think clearly is limited by the words we have. Language is not just a way to speak, it's the way we shape thought. Words are not decorations. They're tools, precise tools, like a carpenter's chisel or a surgeon's scalpel. When you have the right words, you don't just speak better, you think better. You process reality more accurately. You articulate your emotions without drowning in them. You become less reactive, more thoughtful, more exact. The Stoics believed this too. They taught that philosophy isn't just about living well, it's about thinking well. And thinking well requires precision. As Epictetus said, first, learn the meaning of what you say, and then speak. Let me tell you about Richard. He was quiet in meetings, but when he did speak, his words were like arrows, straight, simple, unmistakable. Someone once asked him, "How do you speak so clearly?" Richard said, "I don't chase fancy words. I study true ones." He read not to sound smart, but to think clearly. He wrote not to publish, but to understand. Instead of saying, "I'm tired," he would say, "I feel mentally drained because I made too many small decisions today." That's the power of vocabulary, not for show, but for depth. And modern science agrees. Studies show that people with a richer vocabulary regulate emotion better, solve problems faster, and connect more deeply in relationships. Why? Because the brain is a pattern machine, and words are the codes it uses to sort experience. Without words, frustration builds, emotions blur together. You feel something but can't name it. And when you can't name it, you can't tame it. Ever heard the saying, "If all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail"? That's what happens with a limited vocabulary. You have one way to express anger, one way to show sadness, one way to connect dots, so your world becomes flat, narrow, predictable. But when your vocabulary grows, so does your inner life. Instead of saying "I'm mad," you might say, "I feel dismissed. I feel violated. I feel powerless." Each word points to a different truth, a different response, a different path forward. The Stoics didn't use words to impress. They used them to clarify, to get closer to reality, to understand life, not escape it. So how do you build this kind of vocabulary? Start simple. Read not just to absorb, but to observe. Notice how words are used in context. Pause when a sentence moves. You and ask why. Look up a new word, not just for its definition, but for its feeling. Then test it. Try using it in your life, not to perform but to see, does this word carry your truth better? Also write, even just a few lines a day. Writing slows the mind down. And when you slow down, you see more. You start to notice the words you repeat, the cliches you hide behind, the moments where your language fails your truth. And little by little, you sharpen your thinking. You gain more colors on your palette, more tools in your box, more ways to be real. Remember, vocabulary is not memorization. It's not about sounding elite. It's about being free. Free to describe your world as it is. Free to speak your pain, your joy, your confusion. Free to connect with precision, with compassion, with depth. Because the better you speak, not louder, not longer, but clearer, the more the world listens. And more importantly, the more you listen to yourself. So today, I don't ask you to learn 10 new words. I ask you to learn one deeply. Own it. Use it. Test it. Because every new word you learn is not just a sound, it's a mirror, a lens, a bridge to a truer version of your mind. And once your words reflect clarity, your life starts to do the same. But here's the thing, even the clearest words can fall flat if the person speaking them isn't really there. So in the next chapter, we're going beyond vocabulary and diving into something more powerful, presence. Chapter 4, communication is not just words, it's presence. Have you ever met someone who didn't say much, but the moment they walked into the room, people felt them? Their presence alone spoke before any words did. They didn't need to raise their voice, flaunt their resume, or try too hard to be heard. And yet, when they finally said something, everyone leaned in, listened, respected. That is what I want to talk about today. Because communication, my friend, isn't just about what you say. It's about who you are while you're saying it. There's a misconception in our world that if you can find the perfect words, you'll be heard. That articulation alone is enough. But the truth is, the words are just the surface. What gives them life is your presence, your energy, your intention. I want you to imagine two people saying the same sentence. I understand what you're going through. One says it out of obligation, barely looking up from their phone. The other says it slowly, from a still place, making gentle eye contact, holding space. Same words, different impact, because only one of them is present. The Stoics taught this beautifully. Marcus Aurelius didn't just rule Rome, he embodied a sense of calm authority. He didn't dominate with force. He led with equanimity, a grounded, balanced mind. That's what we feel in people who communicate with presence. They're not performing. They're not reactive. They're rooted. In fact, real communication begins long before the first word leaves your mouth. It begins in your breath, your posture, your stillness, the way you listen before you speak, the way your body says, I'm here, I'm not scattered, I'm with you. I once met a woman named Claire. She was a therapist, soft-spoken. She never used grand language or powerful statements. But when she listened, people cried. Why? Because her silence didn't feel like absence. It felt like safety. And when she did speak, her tone was like warm water, slow, clear, grounded. She taught me this: you don't need to speak like thunder. You just need to speak from truth. And that truth, it doesn't live in vocabulary books. It lives in your inner clarity. When your words align with your values, your voice becomes magnetic, not loud, not dramatic, just undeniable. Even in public speaking, you can spot it. There are speakers who pace nervously, clutter their words, chase validation. And then there are those who stand still, breathe fully, and speak with calm weight. Their secret: they're not trying to impress you. They're simply grounded in their message. Their speech is not decoration. It's an extension of their being. The Stoics remind us, you cannot give what you don't possess. If you want to communicate clarity, cultivate clarity within. If you want to be received with respect, move through life with integrity. Because when your words are an extension of your inner world, people feel it. No forced eye contact, no fake confidence, just congruence, the alignment between thought, feeling, and expression. So how do you develop this presence? Start by noticing the small things: your breath when you're nervous, the way your body reacts to conflict, the tone you use when you're teary-eyed. Practice being fully in the moment, without rushing to fill silence or seek approval. Before every important conversation, pause, center yourself, ask, what do I want to offer, not just say. Because the moment you stop communicating to perform and start communicating to connect, everything changes. People don't just hear you, they feel you. And in a world full of noise, that kind of presence is rare, is healing, is unforgettable. So, no, communication is not just words, it's energy, it's integrity, it's the way you enter a room. It's your calm in chaos, your warmth in tension, your grace in disagreement. And when those things are in place, your words don't need to be perfect, they just need to be real. Dear friend, after everything we've walked through together, from structured thinking, mindful silence, building vocabulary, to emotional regulation, active listening, and cultivating confidence, I want to leave you with one quiet truth: clear communication is not a talent, it is a reflection of a trained mind. You don't need to say more to be heard. You just need to speak with clarity, from a place of inner order and emotional honesty. Stoic philosophy doesn't teach us to speak to impress. It teaches us to speak with intention, to say less, but mean more, to listen not to reply, but to understand, to express not for applause, but for alignment. Every clear sentence is a mirror of a mind that's been shaped by discipline, compassion, and truth. If something in this message stirred something in you, a desire to live with more depth, more presence, more clarity, then consider subscribing to this channel. We're not just sharing techniques, we're growing a community, a place for people who want to live deliberately, speak truthfully, and connect meaningfully. Join us. We don't speak to perform, we speak to live aligned. This is the path, and it begins with you. Outro: after everything we've walked through together, from structured thinking, mindful silence, building vocabulary, to emotional regulation, active listening, and cultivating confidence, I want to leave you with one quiet truth: clear communication is not a talent, It is a reflection of a trained mind. You don't need to say more to be heard. You just need to speak with clarity, from a place of inner order and emotional honesty. Stoic philosophy doesn't teach us to speak to impress. It teaches us to speak with intention, to say less, but mean more, to listen not to reply, but to understand, to express not for applause, but for alignment. Every clear sentence is a mirror.